Welcome to Rules of Engagement. This is a Starcraft 2 tactical analysis show put on by yours truly, Nick axslav ranish, brought to you by MLG. Every day of the week we have a different, unique theme. Let's take a look at some of those themes right now. Every Monday, 7 to 8 Eastern, we have Talking Tactics. That's where we take a look at pro replays, the tactics they use, and how you can use those tactics at home to enhance your play. Every Tuesday, Developing Fundamentals. This is where we take a look at the very fundamentals of the game, how some of those are overlooked by a lot of players, and mastering those fundamentals can often boost you up in the ranks. Or for you new players out there, or you want to bring a new player into the game, check out this show to see the right way to approach learning the game and getting better. Wednesday, Mechanics of the Bizzare. That's going to be today. Again, looking at professional level replays, but this time looking at replays where they do some crazy strategies in battlecruiser rushes, mothership cores, or whatever, taking a look at why they use those strategies in a specific game, why maybe they're not popular and used commonplace throughout professional play. Thursday's Community Critique. That's where you guys send me replays that you want analyzed on the show. Go to majorleaguegaming.com/replays, fill out the form, send in a replay. I'll take a look at those replays and just kind of analyze and critique the community's replays. Friday is a day of self-reflection, where I take a look at some of my own games and see what went wrong, what went good, and good habits I have that you guys can try to pick up back at home to improve your play, and of course the bad habits that you shouldn't do. Don't do what I do in many cases. So let's get into today's episode. Wednesday, Mechanics of the Bizzare. We've got 3 different replays to show to you guys. First one is going to be how to use battle cruisers early on in TVT with Kawaii Rice versus Fantasy. Then we're going to talk about how to use mobility in PvP. And finally, a Roach Queen Nidus attack in CVT. Rounding it off is going to be a Q&A section. If you guys want to ask me questions, go ahead on Twitter at axslav. Tweet me any question you want, and I'll answer at the end of this show. Let's jump right into battlecruisers in TVT. There's a couple important things to know about using them. One is to know when should you even use battlecruisers in TVT. The second thing you should know is if you're going for battlecruisers, what you should do with your non-battlecruiser army. And your last thing is going to be what to do with your actual battlecruiser army. Let's jump into this game here. It's going to be Kawaii Rice versus Fantasy. We're going to start about the 12-minute game, 12 minutes into the game, and we're going to see what we have so far. Kawaii Rice has opened bio units. It's a pretty even game. You can see supplies are about even. The worker counts are fairly even, a slight edge to Fantasy. So Kawaii Rice is slightly behind here, and that's because he's taken only 2 losses. Actually, those are ones. He just hasn't built as many SCVs, so he's a little bit behind in that regard. But basically, everything's normal. Kawaii Rice is going bio. Fantasy, he's going mech. Kawaii Rice knows this because he's scouted 3 factories, and importantly, he's scouted an armory. And I'll get to why that's so important later. Always know what you want to see for a scout, and I'm going to tell you why he would be looking for an armory with his scout and why that's so important to his play in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about why he's choosing to go BCs this game. You can see he's already adding in a 2nd starport. A 3rd is going to be constructed shortly. The only reason you get 3 starports this early is for BCs. I mean, there might be some weird Raven play, but pretty much just for BCs. So, when is he going for BCs? 1, he's on 3 base economy. You have to be on 3 base economy before you can even think about going for BCs because they're very expensive and you're going to want to get a couple starports out, which are also expensive. The fusion core, also expensive. All these things cost money. You need to have your support army as well. So, 3 base economy, you need that. Then you need to know that you're going to be safe for the next 5 minutes of play. So, how does Kawaii Rice know he's going to be safe for the next 5 minutes? Why is this the time of the game that he's going for BCs right now? And this is where I come back to that scouting idea. So the fact that he knows Fantasy's going armory, or going mech, excuse me. There's 2 possibilities. He's doing a 2-base mech push, or he's going 3-base turtle mech. Anything with 3 base is going to be least turtling until he maxes out, which is going to take at least a couple more minutes, so Kawaii Rice has some time if he's doing that strategy. Now, if he's doing a 2-base mech push, Kawaii Rice will not be safe for the next few minutes, so we should not go BCs. But the fact that he scouted his armory means that that's not really an option, because the armory slows down a 2-base mech push enough that it's not even really a viable strategy anymore. A 2-base mech push would have 2 factories with reactors, and 2 with tech labs instead of only a single factory with reactor. The extra minerals being used by saving on that second factory with reactor are going to go into a third command center. Quadraize can tell that this is happening and that Fantasy is playing a turtleneck style because of scouting 3 factories and an armory as opposed to scouting 4 factories. So now he knows that he can go for BCs. Now we're going to play through this replay and we're going to talk about a couple things. One is, what should he be doing with his non-BC army? Right now, he has mobility, right? Because he's going bio, his opponent's going mech. So that's very different than the other way to go BCs, which is the way I like to do myself a lot, where you take 3 bases and you go mech yourself, but you only go 2 factories, 1 reactor, 1 tech lab. You just get 5 or 6 tanks and you turtle, right? So that's with an immobile army. If you're going BCs with an immobile army like just tanks and turtling, then you have to defend. You would put a couple tanks back here, a couple tanks back here. In fact, actually, let's jump into the replay, or jump into a copy of the map real quick, and talk about different things you can do depending on the style you're playing, trying to go for BCs. So there's 2 possible styles you can go for. One is going to be the style that Quadraize is going for, where he's going bio. If you're going bio and your opponent's going mech, you're more mobile and you're safe from attack. So you want to posture aggressively, so the mech player has to be passive and you have more warning time before they come out, which will all buy you time to get BC. So you want to put your bio army in 2 different locations. You're going to have a section over here. This thing's not quite working. Let me bring this back up. There we go. So it should be working now. You're going to want to... Alright, well, never mind. Forget the touchscreen. You're going to want to position your units in a couple sections. Let's just actually jump back into this game and talk about them. You're going to have a bunch of units in this section. And the reason why you want your units over here is because this is going to allow you to attack this way if your opponent moves out via this way. And then the other place you're going to want to have units is you're going to want to have some units in this area. And this will allow you, if your opponent moves out this way, you can attack into the 3rd base through this angle, or you can attack down south towards their middle base. So you have multiple ways you can counterattack them as they move out. These counterattacks are going to be great because they'll buy you time or at least damage your opponent. And the reason you can afford to do this is because you're more mobile than your opponent. So if they try to come after your different squads of units at different parts of the map, you can quickly retreat away from them using your superior mobility. So if they push out along this route, this army right here, you're going to retreat it south, and you're going to have it stationed back here, ready to come either to defend or to counterattack if their army leaves an opening. And meanwhile, your army here would attack in. And if they attack out through this way, you would do it the other way around. Whichever army their army moves out at, you retreat. The other part of your army, you're going to come in for the attack with. So that's how you posture aggressively. Of course, if you're going for a more siege tank in the battlecruiser strategy, you would just stay defensive. You put, a couple siege tanks here and a couple siege tanks here, and then have a line of missile turrets in your main so you can't be dropped. 2 ways to go for BCs. If you have a slow army, you want to just turtle up defensively. If you have a mobile army, you want to posture aggressively and get ready to counterattack and go into a base raid if you have to. So now the next question is what to do with your BCs once you get them up. So here's a really good quote from Sun Tzu I think applies to the situation, because you're spending so much money on BCs that your army is going to be inferior to your opponent. And so what Sun Tzu says, so this means you're not going to want to fight. And so what he says is, if we do not wish to fight, we can prevent the enemy from engaging us, even though the lines of our encampment be merely traced out on the ground. This means you have no good defenses, so you can't fight them. All we need to do is to throw something odd and unaccountable in his way. And this is great for when you're going BCs against mech, because you can just get the BCs, and our giant mech army is going to be tanks and Hellions. It's going to move across the map, and you may have no defenses, you may have no answer for the huge army until his BCs come. That is going to be something they didn't account for. It's going to entirely shut down their attack, and so you can avoid the fight just by showing them a single battlecruiser. And the other problem is that's if they have a mech army that can't fight BCs, right? The other situation is They scouted your starports. They have Vikings, and they have a couple other things, the Thors maybe. And if they have an army that can deal with BCs, then you need to play it a little bit differently. We need to do in that situation, actually let's pause it right here. You can see what Quirice is doing, as I said. He had his units postured here and then some units postured here. And of course, he's retreating them as the army moves out. And this force is one that can come in and backstab. This force is going to retreat back to be a stalling force for defense, just to prevent Hellions from running by and causing havoc. Just to force his siege tanks to have to go into siege mode and slow down Fantasy's push just a little bit. Let's get back into what I was talking about, which is if the army can deal with battlecruisers very effectively, then you have to, what you want to do is you want to form a defensive line and use the battlecruisers to reinforce that line. And so you have to combine them with tanks to keep ground units off them, like Marines or Thors. Or actually, Thors aren't really a threat, so just keep Marines off them. And then also make sure you have plenty of Vikings so you can maintain the air superiority, or keep them with missile turrets to protect them from the Vikings. Tanks, missile turrets, and BCs is a very strong defensive line. You can defend with a very small force like that. Meanwhile, you can use your bio component to launch counterattacks. So either the BCs alone can defend, or you have to combine them with some missile turrets, Vikings, tanks, etc. to make a defensive line while the rest of your army counterattacks. So in this game, what we can see here is his non-BC army. He retreated and he still has this station here, so if Fantasy moves out, he can counter. And this other army here is going to stay on defensive mode to zone out Hellions. So the Hellions are going to be kind of annoying here, but they are going to get eventually shut down. Getting a few SCV kills, but not too many in the process. Now when Fantasy does decide to move out right here, this is when, as soon as Quirice realizes this little secret army is going to come into play, because he knows he can't fight the mass tank army straight up with his bio army because he's invested in battlecruisers. So instead he scares it, right, with this army, just makes him siege, slows him down a little bit, and this army is going to come in here for the counterattack, right? And if he can knock out Fantasy's bases, it's going to make it much harder for Fantasy to build up a composition that can beat the battlecruisers because his economy is being attacked right now. So now he chose the battlecruisers because he doesn't want to fight. Fantasy has to retreat, just like that Sun Tzu quote said, pretty much. And all of a sudden, Fantasy's retreating, but he's already lost his middle base, which means he's down a base because, of course, Quirice is taking his bottom right base. And it also means it's going to be very hard for Fantasy to produce the amount of Vikings and Thors he needs because he has less economy. So this army is being cleaned up, but that's okay because they killed the base, the battlecruisers defended attack, everything's going well, and now Quirice has a superior economy, a superior tech. They can just push on to the win, or at least strangle Fantasy out of resources and starve him out this game. I mean, we'll just actually check the rest of this game out because it's pretty cool. Just playing a little bit safe, going to slowly kill everything with battlecruisers, and then eventually Fantasy's going to try to fight back with some Thors and rallied Vikings, but Quirice's rally is too strong because he has that extra base on his opponent. So Fantasy tries, but Thors don't do so well against battlecruisers. Fantasy doesn't have the income to produce the amount of Vikings he needs to overwhelm Quirice's air force because Quirice has his own Vikings. He's going to force Fantasy to GG out and win the game using the battlecruisers in this method. So to recap about when you want to use battlecruisers in TVT, the first thing is to know when you can go for battlecruisers. So that's where it's very important to remember. You need to have at least 3 bases of economy, and you need to have roughly about a 5-minute window where you're confident that either your opponent cannot attack you, or if they do attack you, you can counterattack them very well. Then you need to know what to do with your non-BC army. If it's a static army, position it into ideal defensive postures. If it's a mobile army, posture it aggressively to threaten counterattacks. Then you have to know what to do with your BCs. If your opponent's army doesn't have an answer to them, you want to go after it, push it back, and try to win the game right then when the surprise factor is at its highest. If your opponent has a way to deal with BCs, then you want to just keep them defensive and use them in conjunction with your siege tanks and missile turrets to slowly creep across the map, picking away your opponent with Emoto cannons while you build up a superior force. Hope you guys enjoyed this segment on how to use BCs in Terran vs. Terran. We're going to take a quick break and be right back with another segment about using mobility in Protoss vs. Protoss.